Okie dokie. All right, so here is what we're doing. We are going to go over the, geez, I thought I lost it there. New project. It is a brief project. It is, you're going to make some of your own library functions and test them and prove that they work. And it should already be open in code.org. If you go and take a look at current unit lesson 8, and it's actually like 8, 9, 10. And so the project, you can see it says lessons 8, 9, 10, which means it's designed for a 3-day project. Designed for 3 45-minute sessions, which I think is probably about right, but that means it's a little tight for one class and more than enough time for the 2 classes that we will allot for it. So the project bubble is just an empty app lab, and the project doesn't require any design elements. Nothing is going to run in the emulator. It's just going to be program code. And you need to first start by completing the planning guide. So you can go ahead and open that, make a copy, put your name in the title. As always, I'm not going to take points off if you don't rename it, but it becomes very clear you're not paying attention. Yeah, file, make a copy, or at least you're not paying attention to details. Smythe. Okay, and then we can go over it so that you can complete it. Okay, so we've been talking about libraries for several days. Should be pretty familiar to you at this point. Okay, libraries let you build functions that allow others, you and others, to build more powerful apps and different kinds of programs. Okay, so the key is designing functions that are useful, well, and functional and work for many different types of applications. The key to that is all local functions, local variables, and that they are useful in a general sense, not just specific to a single program or application. Okay, for this project, you design and build library functions around any topic you want. You'll have the opportunity to exchange feedback with the group or another individual. Again, anywhere, if there's a typo, or if there's anywhere that says teammate, no. There are not very many projects that I would ever assign that are teammate or group. So it'd probably be with another student about how you have an opportunity to exchange feedback with another student. How about how you might use their library to design an app. Finally, you will answer a few questions about the library design. Okay, so the library, you must write at least 4 original functions, which is not asking very much. Okay, each of the following must be included in at least one of your functions. Almost all of them are going to be return functions because that's how library functions work most commonly. They don't all have to have parameters, but that's one of the main ways that return functions work. And the other 2 just need to be present in at least one of the other ones. Okay, brainstorming. Your library can be about any topic, and it doesn't really need to be about a specific topic like we did one for like cats, functions to do with the cats library, or states library, whatever, I think you're probably better off guys, like, okay, so generalized functions are probably a little more useful. Think about, okay, so here are some great examples, and you really can just pick some of them because they are so great. Okay, a return function that capitalizes the first letter of each word in a sentence. Okay, remove spaces from beginning or end of a string, remove a letter, a particular letter from a string, going through list functions, library functions that have to do with arrays, lists, are super useful because lists are super useful. I don't know how to be more specific than that. Okay, something to do with a data set or something you come up on your own. Before you get going in App Lab, superstars who are already about halfway done with the project, that's awesome. But hoops to jump through first are good. You're going to come up with your 4 functions: the name, description, parameter, and returns, and what it's going to include. The description, parameter, and returns are the things that need to go into the comments directly above the function that you're writing. We saw a lot of this format before, and I could show you what they're expecting, what I'm expecting for your comments. First line is an explanation, and yes, it's on 2 lines for the table here. First line is an explanation of what the function does, then what the parameter is called that's being sent, and what data type it is. Data type being string, number, list, Boolean, I forget, object. We can talk about objects, but the name of the parameter and each of the parameters and what type of data they are each is, and then what is being returned and what data type that is. Probably should include a, all right, everyone, if you've already made a copy of the document, go to the requirements. I want you to include one Boolean. Okay. Does everyone understand this? This is now official, even though if you made a copy and are not paying attention now, you still need to do it. Okay. Don't worry, we're going to make some examples. And you've seen a lot, even if you've never written a function that returns true or false, it's not that hard, and you've seen many an example. Okay, so once you design or write out your plan, you're going to go and build your library. And not like that. So start by building the functions and debug, and then there will be testing of inputs. And we've seen testing of inputs. That's like where you put the console log statements below it. And I do want you to do the concatenation. We'll talk about that in a second for your console log statements. It makes it significantly easier for me to grade, considering of so many of these, and this app actually takes way more intricate grading as compared to past projects. But you'll see. Yeah. Awesome. Okay. And we'll talk about, and then there's the free response, copy or paste your function in the library, explain detail step how the algorithm implemented in the identified procedure works, meaning like what is the logic behind it. When you're explaining this, it's not, you don't need to say, first it makes a local variable to store this. No, the algorithm is the logic, the how it's making a decision. And provide a response, describe two calls, selected functions. Okay, well, you can get to this. This is the, again, the response or the end. So we are only spending 2 class periods on this. Okay. So that means the creating the planning guide, the actual project, and the free response in 2 classes should be plenty of time, but it means like you can't really dilly-dally. So we can go ahead and take a look at some ideas. The problem is I don't really want you to take my examples as this is what you do, because I want you to sort of interpret your own or create your own sort of versions. And it would help if you already had a few basic ideas for this. Well, let's see here. Let's do one from each of these, I think, and as an example, and see what it's going to look like. The strings one is actually kind of hard because you have to turn it into a list. Let's just do a simple one, like finding the maximum. You actually have an example of that several places before, but all right. So actually, here is the example. Maximum list takes a list. Well, let's just see what this one would look like. Okay, so if you were doing maximum list, or the function called maximum that receives a list as its parameter, and that parameter's name is list. I don't agree with naming things what they are because it might be confusing, but it seems to work here. And let's see what that would look like in your program code. In fact, let's do, well, it's fine because it's not duplicating anything that you have. Okay, so what do we need? Well, we need to start out with some comments, which are in functions. It's fine. Okay. What does it do? Finds the highest value in a list. Good. And the first parameter is, I want to call it array, and its data type is a list, and it is the list to be sorted. How do they want the explanation of the parameter? Yeah, list of items. And then it will return a number that is the data type, the highest number in a list in the list. Okay, so this is only expecting one parameter to be sent or received rather, and it's going to return a number as its return function. So our function, let's call it find. And this isn't for you to copy right now, just so you know. First of all, it's the example, so don't copy it. But just so you understand what's going on, and I'm just sort of combining two different explanations of what to expect here, or what is expected here versus what is expected here. So you might want to come back to this after the video is posted. But let's call this find max. And the name of the parameter that I've called it R, which is a common short of abbreviation. Abbreviation of array. And its file type is, or excuse me, data type is a list or an array. Okay, so to find a return the maximum value, first we need a local variable that's going to be sort of the running champion for maximum. So let's just call it new max. And anytime you're sorting a list and trying to find an item on that list or something, that's the highest or smallest or something like that, we need to give our local variable that's keeping track of it a possible solution. And one possible solution is the first item in that list, which is index 0. Then we are going to loop through the entire list as given to us. And so that's while I is less than r dot length. And for each one, we're going to check to see if the thing we're checking out, which is our error index I, is greater than our running champion, which is new max. If it is, then the shoebox that holds our running champion, which is new max, gets whatever is in that index of the array we're checking. New man, new max. And the result, what we send back, is whatever is left standing in our running, the shoebox that's holding the running champion. Okay, and while you can't really do testing in a before you start writing things, this can be an explanation of what testing is supposed to look like. So we are testing an array. In order to do that, we need to create an array. Let's call it test array, and let's make a list of several different integers. And close it off. And why is it not letting me close it off? Did I use a different? There we go. Okay, so sure. Okay, and so my test is going to be a console log statement. Okay, and I'm going to do the concat the sentence. The largest number in test array is, end quote. In fact, I want a space in there. Plus, and then call the return function. This return function is called find max. And the parameter that it sends is this list test array. And it should console log the largest number in test array is 90. Yeah, there we go. Okay, and I don't know how you would test this 3 times. I guess you would need 3 different arrays. So I think for something like this would be fine. Yeah. Okay. So the key is you have your comments, you have your full return function and you have a test that works and is true, let's do an example of how to work with the strings, because it's actually kind of complicated. Okay, so we want to capitalize the first letter in each word of a string. And the problem is, while strings do have a lot of the same properties of lists, you can't like reassign a position. Like you could do the name of the string at index 0 will be the first letter, but you can't do the name of the string index 0 gets something and have it replace it, I don't think. So what you actually have to do is turn it into its own array, change what you want to change, and then change it back into a string. So this explanation that I'm showing you right now is actually going to be both an explanation of what's expected in the library, but also a kind of an advanced explanation of some programming stuff. So first, let's start with our explanations, or excuse me, our comments. Okay, capitalizes the first letter in each word of a sentence. Okay, and it's going to receive, let's call it word is what the name of the parameter is going to be, and the data type is string. The word, or excuse me, the sentence. The sentence that the string that needs to be changed, and we are going to return, no, not call return. The thing we're going to return is a string, and it doesn't need a name. It's just the return. The result of the function is the return. And the changed string. Okay, so how would you capitalize the first letter in a given string? So we definitely are receiving one parameter, so we don't need anything extra. The name of this parameter, we're calling it sent. And so in order to, like I said, you need to first turn the string into a complete array. So we need to loop through the entire array. Well, we need a temporary list. Let's call it, I don't know, everything's temporary, but temp string list. I don't know, string list, and have an empty array. And then for, okay, sent is the word we're using. Sent.length number of times. String list index, no, append. We can't use index I because there's nothing in there yet. So we need to use append item to string list, and we want to append sent index I. Okay, so we should test this at this point. Let's make a string that works, and usually do variables at the top, but we're not even testing it till below, so we'll call this test string. And let's have it go. This is the test string. Okay, and let's say, okay, so at this point, the return is not going to work the way it's going to work eventually, but we can test it here. String list with just console logging the return function and see what comes out. So console log let's call this, what do we call this? Make, we got to name the function, make cap. And so we want to console log make caps and send it test string. And we should get back an array where each index, each item in the list is one of these letters. No, what are we doing here? String list. String list, that helps. Let's call it string list. Spelling does count. This is why you debug. And there we go. Okay, so we have our full list where each letter is a item in the list, including spaces. Okay, and the thing we want to return for this is not the list. We need to go through the entire list. Now that we have a list called string list, we need to go through each item. And how do we know it's the first letter of a word? If the item behind it is a space, then whatever is the next item needs to get itself to uppercase. So this is the trick where when we're checking for each item in the list, that's going to be index I, we need to make index I plus 1. And we haven't done anything like this yet, I don't think. Where, okay, so at this point, we've just made the our temporary list. And we also know we want to make the first one capitalized. So we can just go ahead and say string list index 0 gets string list index 0 dot to upper case, open close parentheses, and there's that. And I should have kept the return function in there, or the return in there, just to keep testing. Copy, return. Okay, so now we should get back the list where just the first one is capitalized. Good. Okay, so we've capitalized the first one. Now we need to go through the entire list. So we need a loop. The list we are looping through is called string list. So our loop needs to be string list dot length. That's how many times we're going to loop. And it's okay to use I twice because when each loop starts, it rewrites it. Technically you use J, but you don't need to. Technically you use anything. Okay, and what do we want to do in our loop? We want to check if any one of the items in string list index I double equals a space. What happens if when we go through our list, we find a space? We want the next item in the list to get itself to uppercase. What's the next item in the list? The next item in the list, and this is not something you've seen before, so pay attention, or you may have seen it, index I plus 1. Okay, so inside of your square brackets, if you were doing this type of programming, inside of the square brackets is where you tell the program which index you want to look at. We are checking index I, which is, as we go through all of them, index I plus 1 is the next item in the list. So what do we want to happen to the next item in the list? We want to get itself to uppercase. So string list index I plus 1. Make sure the plus 1, and if you were doing this, the plus 1 needs to be inside of the square brackets. Index I plus 1 dot to uppercase, open close parentheses if you're using these method functions. And so when we run it now, we're returning string list, make caps. Okay, so we should get back in the list where each of the first letters of the word is capitalized, and it does look like we did it, but now we need to turn it back into a string, one string. And so we want the join. Please tell me they gave you the join. Substring, yeah, dot join. So we need string list. We are reassigning string list, the entire list, string list. Wait, do we have to do this as a assignment operator? String list gets string list dot join with nothing in it. And that should make it a string. And there we go. Ta-da. All right. So that is an advanced return function with some interesting concepts in it. It's probably more useful explanation. It's a more useful explanation after you've done your planning, but just so you have some ideas of what's possible or what you might like to attempt, and I am available to help you with the programming aspects of this stuff, so don't worry. But part of the planning is coming up with return functions that you think are within your abilities. So perhaps that explanation expanded your zone of proximal development and your confidence in what is possible. Okay, and so again, there's always going to be some sort of testing at the bottom included in your program code when you submit it. Okay, does anybody have any questions about what's expected? So you should definitely be done with the planning guide, like in the next 15 or 20 minutes tops, and get to programming. And yeah, like I said, I'm happy to help with the brainstorming or debugging, that sort of thing. Okie dokie. And I really do want you to keep the format of the comments at the top. Okay. It'd be very common to have a return function receive two parameters, like checking to see if, and that'd be a good example for a Boolean, checking to see if a list has a certain value, return true or false. It would need to receive two parameters, the list and the number you're checking for. And we can, actually, let's go ahead and do that one. I hesitate to do that one because I think there are several of you who would like to attempt it without the explanation or the spoiler, but whatever. Let's just go ahead and do it. Okay. Let's make another return function. Let's call it has number, and or we don't need to put the name there. It'll be later. Checks if a list has a certain number, and the first parameter it's going to receive is, we will call it, I like calling it R, and that data type is list. The list to be checked, and the second parameter it's expecting, let's call it num, and that data type is number. The number being checked for, that's not good English. And the return is going to be return a Boolean, which this is a great opportunity for you to, or a great type of function to satisfy the Boolean requirement. True if the list has that number. Okay, so we need a function definition. Let's call it this is where we name it, has num, and it's receiving two parameters. The first one we called, it can be called, this is essentially a local variable by itself. We can call it anything, but you might as well call it something that makes sense. R and num, and we need a variable to keep track to see if it's in there, if num is in the list called array or called R, and we can just use test R as our thing when we test it. But if we are testing to see if something is true, our variable needs to start out as false. And that was actually the case for one of the check for understandings from the last lesson. Okay, so has num, let's call it check number or checklist, because I want, okay, I want has num as the variable name, has num, and we can just start that as false, and then we're going to loop through the entire list that we get as our parameter. So we want to do a loop r dot length number of times, and if r index I double equals num, you can just do return true, because we're only checking if it's there at least once. You can imagine that it is more complex if, you know, we don't even need a local variable, because we have, the way we're going to set it up here is we're starting out just going through the list, and if whatever item we're checking is the number that got sent with it, return true, and that ends the whole function. But if we get through the entire list and it never triggers the true, we send back false. So when we console log test list has a 9 plus, and our function name check list, and the two parameters that we send are going to be the name of the list that we're using. We just use test array. Test array, and the number we're checking for is 9, and the result should be test list has a 9, and then either true or false. Does it not have a 9? Test list does not have a 9. Let's see what it looks like with 88. And it should say test list has a, let's do like this. Let's go, test list has an 88. So call it checklist, or call the function checklist, sending test array and the number 88 and true. Okay, so that function works fine. And please clean it up. I love white space in between like major chunks, but that's not good. You know, just make it look clean. The white space should go in logical places, like not just you know, between identical things and that sort of thing. All right, so like I said, those are some ideas and also them executed. Finish your planning guide. There's already a place to submit it on Canvas. And well, I guess you can't submit it until you are done because of the whole response situation. And there's that. Okay. If you have any questions, let me know. But other than that, get some done.